All right, good morning. Got another video coming to you. Here we got atheistic materialism is destroyed by a deck of cards. And this is an example I got from an atheist in a previous video I was doing. And I would call it one of the biggest colossal misdirections and obfuscations that I've seen. But I'm glad they did it. So I'm going to use that as an example. So which means it seems to me, it really does, that they really don't care about the truth. Just they have their worldview, and they'll defend it with any kind of garbage that they come up with. But what I want you to keep in mind is, the atheist, what they want you to do is they want you to believe that we're only talking about one thing or something that has to happen one time. But and specifically, what we're talking about is abiogenesis. But that's not what we're talking about. And the math says otherwise. We're not talking about one thing. We're talking about a lot of things that we'll get into, and it's beyond your comprehension, as we'll see. So, the example, one of my best statistics was from Sir Fred Hoyle. Any probability equal to or greater than 1 part in 10 to the 50th power constitutes a miracle. And that's what I was quoting. And so here's what the atheist said. Then every time a deck of cards is shuffled, you get a miracle. The odds of getting a deck of cards in whatever shuffled sequence you find them, remember that, is 1 in 10 to the 67th power. Well, I cut and pasted this directly from the comment section of a previous video. In fact, I have the 67 highlighted because the example I found online, it said 57, not 67. So, don't matter, don't care, but just a point of, something different. Anyway, so I asked the question, do you realize, Mr. Atheist, what you just admitted to? Do you? So any probability that's 8 times 10 to the 57th power would constitute a miracle as well. And so the real misdirection and statement is in the phrase, in whatever shuffled sequence you find them. Wait a minute, that's not what we're talking about. It is, I've used this example before in regards to the second law of thermodynamics, a sand pile versus a sand castle. Well, if we're to take this example like they just showed, that means that any configuration of the sand that gives you a sand pile, that's also a miracle. Well, that's not what we're talking about. We're trying to get to a sand castle, is what we're trying to get to, not a sand pile. And there are trillions and trillions and trillions, and I can keep saying trillions, for trillions of times, of ways of getting a sand pile and not a sand castle. It's the same thing. So we're not talking about 52 cards in whatever shuffled sequence you find them. No, we're talking about a very, 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 can't say very enough, specific few combinations. Okay. So let's start with the actual example here. Again, what I found was 1 chance in 8 times 10 to the 57th power, not the 67th power of getting at the specific card configuration. But we're talking about getting a specific card configuration. That's what we're talking about in abiogenesis. First life is a specific card configuration. It's not any old card configuration. So what's the chance of getting a pack of cards, and this is the one I like to bring it to, into a specific configuration, and I'm going to say, let's assume it's the original configuration when you buy the deck of cards. When you take it out of the pack, it's in order, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6, and it's also in order in regards to the suite. In other words, you got hearts, then diamonds, then clubs, then spades, or something like that. And each successive number is in that order. So it's in a very specific order. So we're talking about how do we get a deck of cards that we just bought, took it out of the package, we shuffled it a couple of times. Now, how long would it take us to shuffle it to get it back to the original order that it was in? By chance, by shuffling. Well, in the example, they said that cards were first invented in the 14th century or in the 1300s. And so to be generous, they said, let's go back before today 800 years. And they picked the date of 1223, 800 years before today. Great. And we also generously assume that from 1223, there have been 8 billion people on the planet doing nothing but shuffling a deck of cards once a second for those 800 years. And so they said that in all that time, in 800 years, you had 2 times 10 to the 20th power only possible tries to date. which is, as you can see, 0.000, I can't say it all, you can just look at it on the screen, 0.2% of orderings have been seen so far on the planet. So I think it's going to be helpful at this point to give more details. Let's go a little bit deeper and see how ludicrous this example really is. So 10 to the 20th power is still very, very, very far from 10 to the 57th power. So let's do a little stepwise analysis and we'll get closer to that 57th power. So starting off with 10 to the 20th power and moving closer 10 to the 57th power. So, but each time we move the decimal point one position, it is a 10-fold increase in the amount, in this case, it's going to be time needed to do it. Well, we started with 800 years, so as to go from 10 to the 20th power to 10 to the 21st power, we multiply 800 by 10 and get 8,000 years. Now, adding the next power of 10, we again multiply the 8,000 years by 10 to get to 80,000 years. See what's happening? And then we add the next power. Well, that's 800,000 years. And we're only to 10 to the 23rd so far. Then 8 million years, 10 to the 24th. Then 80 million years, and then 800 million years, and then 8 billion years, and we're only at 10 to the 27th power. Then 80 billion years at 10 to the 28th power, several times the age of the universe already. And then 800 billion years, 10 to the 29th power, and then 8 trillion years, and then 80 trillion years, and then 800 trillion years, and then 8 quadrillion years. That's 10 to the 33rd power. Nowhere near 10 to the 57th. So can you say, wow? So all of what I've written pertains to 52 cards. And here's a unique thing that I want you to keep in mind, because we'll talk about it. Each position of this deck of cards is unique. In other words, there's no other card that can take the place of any other card, and this will become relevant in a moment. But someone will say, well, wait a minute, there's 4 2s in the deck. Well, that's true, but they're also bound by their label of either they're a heart or a diamond or a spade or a club. So in fact, each card is absolutely one of a kind in this deck, and no other card will fit its spot. So it's in a specific order when it was brand new, and each card has only one choice for that spot. Well, now let's contrast this with just a small protein molecule of only 150 amino acids long. Well, what adds to the complexity of the protein molecule, way beyond the deck of cards, is several unavoidable facts. Okay, so for the protein, not only do you need the 150 positions, but each position in the protein could be filled with a total of 20 different amino acids, not just one, like in the deck of cards, which adds exponentially to the complexity. Now, not only does the protein need to be in the correct order, but once the order is arrived at, the protein also needs to be folded into its proper position. And that's the Leventhal paradox. That's one of them. Just the folding is astronomically unlikely to happen in just the folding. Has nothing to do with everything else about it, but just the folding of the protein is unlikely to happen by chance in this universe. And if you want to see that, I'll leave a link in the description below to my previous video. So it's not, and then on top of all of that, look, we're not talking about just one protein. Atheists love to do that all the time. They love to talk about just the one thing you're talking about. We're not talking about one protein. A small cell is made up of 42 million protein molecules. And some of those molecules are 1 to 2,000 amino acids long, which means that's 1 to 2,000 positions. And there's 20 different possibilities at each one of those positions. Last but not least, the first cell would also need 10 copies of some of those proteins, up to 500,000 copies of each of the 206 different types of proteins a cell would need to operate on the most minimal basis that they've calculated to date by Origin of Life scientists. So in comparison to 52 cards, we're not talking 52 cards anymore. What chance does the first cell have of coming together by chance? And what's more important, again, back to one of my original claims when I started this, we're not talking about one thing. The first cell would require 42 million deck of cards, not one deck of cards. You can't get to one deck of cards in quadrillions of years, but you now want me to believe that the first cell could come about by chance when you can't even get to one deck of cards. And yet you need 42 million deck of cards. And those deck of cards, some of them have 1,000 cards in each deck. That's hogwash. And it's willful ignorance on your part to simply believe that would ever happen by chance for the first life in this universe. And in only 10 to the 18 seconds, that's all you've got. 10 to the 18 seconds is 13.6 billion years. That's all you got. In fact, you don't even have that much time, and you know it. The Earth is supposedly 4.5 billion years old, and it's only been 3.8 billion years since we've had life. So you don't have that much time. So the atheist deck of cards idea is a bust. But I do appreciate the attempt at obfuscation and misdirection, and I'm glad you gave me the example. That's your example. So chance is not a viable option anymore, as Sir Fred Hoyle, a super intellect, has monkeyed with physics. And I put on there in chemistry and biology and everything else. So it's only getting worse for the atheist as time continues and more is learned, because the complexity is continuing to grow exponentially. And now I used to say that the goalpost you're trying to hit or pass the Andromeda galaxy, well, they're 1 trillion years past the Andromeda galaxy by now. Better hurry up. They're getting further and further away. Enough said. Have a blessed day.